Welcome to It's About Time Conversations with Charlize and Yolanda, where we bring our experiences and our expertise to the table to address relevant topics that impact our lives and our communities. This is the place to be authentic, be transparent, and be inspired. And we welcome you to our table. And I'm Charlize Lewis.
And I'm Yolanda Mason. Thank you all so much for joining us this week. Today, our topic is going to focus on Black women scholars. So I was doing some research in preparation for this topic, and I looked at some of the ways that higher education can actually be seen as almost hostile, if you will, to women of color. A researcher, her name is Amy Bonamy, did an article and did some research just talking about the experiences of women of color in higher education. And there were some very interesting things, kind of 5 takeaways that she offered from her book about women of color in higher ed that I thought would be super interesting and integral to this conversation. First of all, she talked about the fact that women of color, while people of color make up 40% of Americans who are in higher education, less than 5% of African American women are college and university presidents. She also talked about the fact that although nearly 40% of Americans all told are women of color, women of color are still not reflected in the leadership of a lot of universities, particularly predominantly white institutions. She also talked about the fact that women of color tend to have to deal with, when they are present in higher education, they tend to deal with things like microaggressions. They tend to deal with folks considering them, quote, intimidating. They tend to deal with kind of barriers and boundaries that white men and maybe our counterparts, Caucasian women, do not have to deal with. And also, I took an opportunity to talk to several of my friends who are in higher education. Many of them are graduate students currently, and then others of them have moved up and are teaching assistants and are just kind of working their way up the chain in higher education. And what I heard over and over again is that while African American women do well in graduate school, African American women matriculate and graduate at a higher rate than our counterparts. African American women also find themselves in difficult positions in higher education, often feeling not understood. In fact, one person who I talked to, who is a mental health counselor and got her education, both her bachelor's and her master's degree, at a PWI in Kentucky, simply said that the experience as a woman of color in higher education left her traumatized. When I asked her to just give me one word, I said, if you could put your experiences in higher education into one word, what would it be? And her answer was traumatized. And I think it was very telling. And I think that these statistics and these points simply bring us to, again, that elephant in the room. And that is that while African American women are often represented in the body of students at PWIs in higher numbers, we are not given the same respect when it comes time to appoint for jobs or positions in higher echelons of leadership. And oftentimes African American women come away from the higher education experience with trauma, with some feeling that they are not fully accepted in that arena. And so we want to talk about that today. We have Black women scholars here with us today who are going to be, as we always say in our introduction, very transparent and very real and very honest, and talk about the experiences of African American women and women of color in higher education.
So today with us, we have Dr. Erin Gilliam from Kentucky State University, my alma mater.
Hey.
She's an associate professor and dean of the Whitney Young Honors College. And so she has extensive research and presentations centered around Black women scholars, diversity and race, and African American contributions to the bourbon industry. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also have Dr. Soraya Matthews, who is the Vice President for Improvement Service at Cognia. And she's also served as an adjunct professor at Georgetown College. And she just recently released The Equity Evolution, which chronicles her experiences with racism, implicit bias, and the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the educational institutions. So thank you all both for joining. And I also want to say this, I've known both of these ladies for many years, and I also know some things about their work. And so I know Soraya has had various, I guess it's experience and expertise in terms of education. So you've been at very many levels of education. You've been in K through 12, you've been at the Kentucky Department of Education. So talk a little bit about your journey to become you. We talked about that self-actualized you and keep going for the dream, but you as an African-American woman who has traveled this road in education professionally.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say I've done so many different roles in education. I've been in education now for over 20 years, and just thinking about what that road has looked like for me. Starting out initially, I served as a trainer and working with teachers and educators and how to use technology in their classroom at a very young age. And as you can probably imagine, looking how I look and being as young as I was at the time, it was a little bit of a struggle of even getting teachers to know and understand that I knew what I was talking about, and to take some of the advice that I was giving them on practices and how to embed technology in the classroom. So that's kind of where I got my start. And then, I mean, I was very young. I was first year in college, actually, just that young. But that led to me wanting to become a teacher myself, just knowing and seeing those experiences of different teachers and feeling like really not only can I help and support teachers, but I can be a teacher and help and support students in doing this work myself. So that's where my career path started in education. I've done so many other things, from being a teacher and then moving into the administration field, of course, many years later. Starting out at the Department of Education, as you also mentioned. So I went from classroom straight to the Department of Education for Kentucky in helping and supporting state schools. So I worked through the entire state supporting students who were on IEPs, or students who are deaf and hard of hearing, as well as our students who are blind and visually impaired throughout the entire state of Kentucky. So that was another different role, and very much one that before I was I guess, coined with the position, there was no one of color in my position prior to me. So those were some doors that I had to kind of knock down and show and prove again that I was very well capable of doing the job. From KDE, I've served as a principal as well at the School for the Deaf, which is located in Danville. As you can imagine, those experiences are some to write home about. I can't wait to share a little bit more in depth about some of those. But then I've also worked in a large district at Fayette County, which most of you are very familiar with, right here at home, 43,000 students. I serve as a director for curriculum instruction assessment for all secondary schools. So that's just a little bit of the K-12 world, right? As Charlize mentioned, I've worked in the college atmosphere. I worked for Georgetown College in the master's program for teacher leaders, just serving and working with teachers who were already in the field, who were wanting to advance their education and understanding around specific topics, but my class was really focused on equity and inclusion in the classroom. And then now working with Cognia, we really support all schools. We support 36,000 schools in 85 different countries in the education realm. Accreditation is our main focus, but we also do professional learning, helping and supporting teachers, school leaders, principals, boards of education, superintendents, all the like. So I'm really, really excited about sharing some of those experiences that we've talked about from my perspective of being a Black female.
Thank you, Soraya. And so you said something, and it made me immediately look at Erin. You said something about youth. So I know she's gotten her start early as well. And she's still fairly young. I'm not going to tell your age, girl, but you are still fairly young. So when you talked about, not necessarily being taken seriously because of your age as well, it did make me think of Erin and the role she's in right now. So Erin, give us a little bit about, your background and where you are in the journey. You are muted.
I'm sorry. I'm a proud K-State graduate. And I was a middle school and high school social studies teacher first. And I did that at the age of 21. And I taught high school AP American history, and some of the students were 18. And that experience, and I taught in Eastern Kentucky. So that experience could definitely be a different experience, especially when we talk about race and we talk about class and we talk about coming from an HBCU. And then I went on and got a master, 2 masters, a PhD, and came back to Kentucky State to teach as a professor before I was 30. And I think about, and so youth has definitely been, oh, is she qualified? Is she ready? And that's something that I get from not just students, but that's from colleagues as well. More so actually, when I think about it, more so it's my colleagues. And, it's even I'm not big on titles, but it has come to the point in some instances where, hey, because you keep calling me little lady or young lady, you're going to have to, we're going to have to use doctor, and that's horrible to say that in some sense, but it comes to this, like, or baby girl, like, no, that's not appropriate in this setting. And there's a balance that I'm learning.
And I remember when I was a freshman at Kentucky State University, I had a professor named Dr. Lynn Michelle Darby. She is now deceased, but a lesson she taught me, when students would come up to her, as a freshman, you don't get the title thing. You don't really understand it. And so I remember someone walking up to her and saying, Miss Darby, Miss Darby, Miss Darby. She said, no. She said, I'm Dr. Darby. Miss Darby's at home making dinner for her husband and her children. She said, in this setting, I'm Dr. Darby. And the reason being is because there were challenges that came with her being an African-American woman, the gender and the race and the intersectionality of both of those things in the workplace. And so talk to me a little bit. I'm gonna start with you, Soraya. Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges that you've really found in the workplace, but even you got your doctorate too. And there are challenges when you are working on that degree, any level graduate degree, that you will see or you will experience that sometimes seem unbelievable. Like, is this really happening? Because I've been there, and Yolanda's been there too. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Wow. Just where to start when you talk about challenges. So since you mentioned in the process of getting my doctorate degree, I will say that one of the challenges I faced in the workplace is what I call hitting someone else's ceiling. So essentially, whether you're working with colleagues or even in some cases a supervisor, he or she, in many of my cases, it's actually been a she, really want to make sure they put you in your place and that you never surpass their ceiling. So one of the things I experienced even after I received my doctorate degree was that, I want to remind you that just because you have a doctorate degree doesn't mean that you know more than me or that I'm going to allow you to ever show that you know more than me. So I found that even prior to my doctorate, getting my doctorate, things seemed a little bit easier. And after I got my doctorate, it seemed harder because I felt like I think that my supervisors or whomever the situation was at the time felt like that I thought at that point I was more than them or that I knew more than them. And so it's like they exerted extra effort to keep me at bay or keep me under their ceiling. So I've said that all the time. One of the things I've really experienced more than anything is hitting someone else's ceiling. And more than right now, I'm so elated just thinking about how we are breaking those glass ceilings left and right. So when you talk about, the doctorate degree and knowing that some of the things that we all have to deal with, right? And we love for them to just go away magically. we know that we have to continue to fight those things and not necessarily sit and take that being called Mrs. or being called by your first name. Sometimes you have to assert that degree and say, I am doctor. You will refer to me as Dr. Matthews. And you have to be okay with doing that.
I remember saying to you when you published your book, I said, I'm so glad you put your credentials on there. And I said, because guess what? White men do it all the time. Put your letters on there.
They do.
They
They
do it.
do.
Right, Erin. So Erin, I'm gonna toss the baton to you. So what were your experiences? I know you had to have some similar things, right?
Definitely. I think that we could talk about all levels of education, just from even parents. When parents would encounter me and they would, you can't be the teacher. You're the teacher. And I think it's a race thing. It's an age thing. And I step into meetings now, and I had a former provost tell me, and I was rushing to get to the meeting, and I was running up the stairs of Hathaway Hall. And she said to me, she said, what are you rushing for? And I said, well, I don't want to be late. And she said, calm down. You're running the meeting. And she's like, this is your meeting. She said, this, you called, the assistants have called this meeting for you. This is your meeting. And that took me into a space where sometimes I have to say, hold on, Erin, you're not the 12-year-old girl, or you're not the 20-year-old girl on UK's campus trying to impress your advisor or impress your professor. You have reached, I haven't achieved everything, but I have hit certain goals, and I deserve that respect. And I think that sometimes that becomes a self thing that I have to tell myself, I'm supposed to be here. And I think that goes, we could talk about Charlize all day, the imposter syndrome. And that am I not supposed to be here? Why do I think I'm not supposed to be here? I remember texting a mentor. I received a fellowship a couple of years ago for African-American history. And I texted the mentor and I was like, everybody in here is from like Yale, Princeton or something. He was like, that's fine. That's fine. They in there with somebody from Kentucky State. And if anybody knows Charles Holloway, you could hear him saying that. Real smart, that's fine. They in there with somebody from Kentucky State. Tell them to get this knowledge.
He absolutely said it.
Right. So, and I go into that, and I transition to that, and I'm also the mom of two girls. So, and I want them to have that same confidence. So I think that when, I walk in with the confidence and the bravado and all of that, but there's also this part of me that's just from time of being in educational and academic settings where I am still like trying to assert myself within this, like, I like how Dr. Matthews, you said that I'm breaking other people's ceilings. It's other people's ceilings. And I think about that, and I'm definitely going to take that with me.
So I'm thinking about just listening to you all talk about the challenges that you've experienced in higher education, kind of that fight for respect, that fight to make sure that your credentials are respected and that you are acknowledged for the work that you've done, and even for the titles that you have worked hard to earn, because I know it's been no easy road for either of you, because both of you have your PhDs. I'm thinking about a conversation. I think I mentioned earlier that I talked to some of my friends who are in higher education at the school I attend, the University of Kentucky. And I asked her in preparing for this conversation, I said, what do you think has been the difference maker? So with all of the challenges, with the kind of uphill climb that we face as women of color in higher education, I asked her, what's the thing that made it easier? Was there anything that helped to kind of shield you and protect you and cover you as you fought those challenges? And she said one word: mentorship. And so that got me kind of thinking, and I really want to ask you all, I think I'm going to start with Dr. Soraya, and then I'm going to kick it to you, Dr. Erin. Dr. Soraya, how important, or has mentorship been important in your journey as you've worked kind of from undergrad through graduate school up to your doctorate degree, and having so many positions, incredible experiences that you shared with us. Has mentorship played a role in your journey? And if it has, can you talk a little bit about that? How important is mentorship? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. So I would almost attribute mentorship to my success. Even going back to being an undergrad student, I remember my freshman year, second semester, I had gotten a lot of scholarships first semester, and no one tells you that you have to save that money for the second semester because scholarships only come in the fall time, right?
Yeah.
So I was stuck in the second semester with a bill that I could not pay, could not afford to pay. And there was a Black lady who was in, and I went to a PWI. She was in our financial aid office and she sought me out. She knew, I don't know how, but she knew I needed some help and support. And she really took me up under her wing and showed me how to navigate higher ed because I had no one else to show me that. She showed me how you go out. Here are some other scholarships that you can apply for that are biannual. You'll get them both in the fall and in the spring. Right. And, you know, she introduced me to actually a scholarship that ended up paying not only for my undergrad, but my graduate work too, through the Gates Millennium Scholarship, which was through the United Negro College Fund. She introduced me to that. And if it had it not been for her taking me under her wing, I would not be sitting here today, and I know it. So that was just the start of it. But throughout my career, I have definitely, I've been introduced to phenomenal mentors from, you know, inside of higher ed, of course. And ironically, when I was a student at the University of Kentucky, my mentor there was a white male. But he very much poured everything into me that he possibly could and made sure in every way that I could be successful. So, you know, mentors can look differently, but I've also had a host of African-American female mentors. My very first, as I would consider, I guess, work mentor was Johnny Grissom, who was at the Kentucky Department of Education. I know Charlize knows who I'm talking about. Yes. And I was later honored with an award in her name a couple years back. And it was just the most impactful. And it just brought me to tears to be named in honor of her, because she truly was a mentor for me. Other mentors that I've experienced throughout the workplace, I honestly can say that had I not had those mentors, I probably wouldn't have been as successful in my job as far as getting through some of the minutia, some of the things that, you know, we do focus and that we do experience as African-American females in leadership. So I would absolutely say mentorship is critical, which is why I also think it's very important that we continue to give back. I always look for opportunities to mentor others through their struggles or through whatever they're having to deal with in their perspective of navigating, whether it's education or the workplace.
That's good. And what I really like, Dr. Soraya, that you talked about having even had a white male who was a great mentor. And so that just kind of reminds me that we should keep our minds and our eyes open, because my grandmother used to say, you never know which way God is blessing from. And so you just don't know who that person's going to be. So I think that's powerful. And then for you to have that full circle moment of one of your mentors being someone, and then you get an award in her name that was in her honor and named after her. So I think that's a powerful example of what mentorship does. Dr. Erin, I'm gonna throw that question to you as well. And again, it's the same question. In thinking about mentorship, thinking about what it means to be covered, what it means to be guided, what it means for someone to model for you, perhaps something that you've never tried before. How important has that been to you in your journey, or has it been? What would you say about mentorship?
It's extremely important to me. It guides me now. I will be honest, my graduate school experience, I went from a historically Black college to smaller schools, and then I went to a large PWI for graduate school, UK. That was a very hard experience for me, to say the least. I'll be honest, after graduation, it probably took me, and I live in Lexington, it took me a couple of years to be able to go on the campus. without having some sense of just, I didn't even want to drive by it, like, just to be honest. And so when I think, like, it wasn't a good experience for me as a Black student, as a Black woman. I can just, I have countless of examples of why. But then I think about the mentors at the time when I was on the campus. Dr. Robert Mock was the VP of Student Affairs, and that, I'm a historian. I'm in American history, African American history. There is no reason why I should be working with the VP of Student Affairs. But he sought out, at that point, I was the only African American person in the PhD program. So he sought me out for a graduate assistantship. I had people, the VP, the first diversity president of University of Kentucky, who was Dr. Judy Jackson. She found me on campus, and so it was oftentimes like people that I didn't even know or weren't even in my field, that sought me out and read my dissertation. Dr. Feats Price, who's in the counseling and education. And here I am, a historian writing about historically Black colleges in Kentucky, and Dr. Feats Price is sitting with me in her office planning and mapping my dissertation with me. Because I had gotten to the point where I'm leaving, I'm done, they can have it. But it was, for me, it was these Black people, these African American people that saw me on this campus and sought me out, who sought me out and said, if you ever need anything, of course, I went, hey, I need some money. I need a graduate assistantship.
Yes, ma'am.
Who made sure to keep in touch with me. And even if, like, Dr. Feats Price rose in her, she's the president now, she would still send me text messages. Did you write today? How much writing you get done today? And it was those type of mentors. My advisor in my department, he was Black, and he helped me along. He had a quiet spirit, but he definitely helped along as well. But I just, when I talk to my students who are transitioning from undergrad to graduate, and they're going from historically Black colleges and PWIs, I always just tell them to seek out people that look like you. And that's not saying that all skin folk ain't your kinfolk. We know that. Certainly. But to seek out people that look like you, and seek out people that have and you'll know, your spirit will tell you whether that person wants to see you do well or wants to take something out of you and not pour something back into you. I think the advantage that I do have is that I also didn't go straight from undergrad into graduate school. I taught for a while, had different experiences. And so when people bring those, like, I was intimidated a little bit because I did, for what some people thought, I had a later start in grad school. And people that went straight from undergrad, and that intimidated me a little bit. But I'm like, no, I got this, and I have to, I'm here. I made it.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I like that I have to say this because, of course, UK is my alma mater. People like Dr. Judy Jackson and people like Dr. Feats Price, they literally have made the difference on that campus for me. And sometimes it was just having them there. Sometimes it was just looking to see them. And I kind of want to just really quickly, if we have time, Charlize.
We have time.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I don't want to get fired. Okay, but I was thinking about as I listened to you all talk about your experiences and talk about that mentorship piece. Say a quick word about representation. Something that I have hanging on my wall in my workspace just says representation matters. How important is representation when it comes to being a person of color? And you already touched on it, Dr. Gilliam. So can you kind of expound on that a bit? And then I'll throw it to Dr. Soraya just really quickly. Representation, I think it matters. What do you think when it comes to African American women?
It totally matters, and representation, and I even think as a mom, it's important for my girls to see people that look like them, to see a dentist, a pediatrician, a teacher that look like them. And it's not this anomaly that we're still talking about. I mean, we are, sadly, in 2021, we're still talking about the first this and the first that. And we talk about Vice President Kamala Harris, and we talk about these things. But representation matters. And as a graduate student at the University of Kentucky, coming from a University of Louisville and coming from a Kentucky State University, it mattered to me. I needed to see the Dr. Feats Price, the Dr. Brown Wrights. I needed to see these Black women in these roles, because that, I will be so all the way honest. In my head in graduate school, I can't even remember. It was the KDE little website, and you could search for jobs, and it had all the counties, all the county schools, or all the county's jobs out. And you could just put in the county, or you put social studies ed, school counselor, and all your certifications, and tell you all the jobs open. So I'd sit in like my liberal history class, and I'd start typing into that website, like, let's see where I can go next.
Right.
I had written off graduate school, the University of Kentucky.
I know.
I had written off, I think at the time, Texas or Louisiana. I think Hurricane Katrina had maybe passed a year or two before that. And they were recruiting teachers and giving like a $20,000 bonus.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, Mama, I'm moving to Louisiana to teach social studies. And I think about those things. But then I also, if it wasn't for those Black women that I saw, or those Black men like a Dr. Mock or a Dr. Cleo Price that were like, all right, Erin, focus, be rational. We're gonna get you a graduate assistantship. We're gonna get you some money, and you're supposed to be here. And of course, they didn't say it like that. And there were some that were very candid who would say they don't want you to be here, but you're here. And I did the extra things. I went to the Writing Center. I sought out students who had passed the course, and I was like, why am I struggling? I had a professor who had won all these awards nationally for teaching, of all the things, white male. He was teaching school integration, and he was this post-racial educator.
Oh boy!
And he sat in class and told me that I wasn't going to make it, and that I shouldn't be here. And it was full of racial microaggressions. And it was full of the things that he would say in class. And I was the only Black person in the class. And I knew it was directed. It was kind of one of those things. Well, let's talk about slavery. Erin, what are your thoughts? Like, that question is extremely simple. And I'm being extremely dramatic and overplaying that question. Sure. But in that sense, that's how it felt.
Absolutely.
And so representation and needing to be able to go to those places and complain, but yet complain and they make me get back up on it, was important too.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Dr. Soraya, just really quickly, your thoughts about representation, us seeing ourselves on college campuses and in those offices and in those roles, those leadership roles that are really important. What do you think about that? Can you reference how seeing us in those positions may have helped you along the way as well?
Absolutely. Representation is everything, right? And as Dr. Gilliam has alluded as well, it is so crucially important that we are represented in the boardroom, that we are represented in the classroom, that we are, as the teacher as well as the students, that we are represented in decision making, that policy decisions, anything that's going to include something that impacts us. But the reason that is important is because of the perspective that's brought to the table. When you have diversity or any, just diversified candidates, diversifying what's happening in the room, you bring so many additional perspectives to the table, and you essentially, you are eliminating that exclusionary factor. Because that's really where we end up falling through the gaps, is that we're being excluded in some way, in some fashion. We've not been considered. Even if you think about, even in the hiring process at higher ed or really at any institution, if the person sitting across the table from you, if you're interviewing for that college adjunct or professor position, isn't of someone of color or someone who looks like you that can represent what you represent, it's really hard for that person to see themselves in you. I say that all the time. Like you can't hire what you don't know, or sometimes people hire what they're comfortable with. Well, if your only scope is, homogeneous, whatever that is, if it's white or whatever, if that's all you know, then when you see someone like me across the table from you, then you don't know how to take me. You don't know that when I make a certain glance or a certain smile, that's not something to be afraid of or something to think that I'm being offensive towards you. That's why representation is important, because the person on the other end of the table needs to be able to see themselves in me.
Absolutely.
My experiences in college, I think, very much alludes to that the people who were who I was able to depend upon and needed to depend upon, I knew that I could go to people who look like me. It's a natural, it's almost like a natural connection. When you see a person, a woman of color, there's like, how the guys have the head nod, women, Black women have something internally too, that when we see each other, we have that recognition that, okay, it's okay. She knows me and I know her. She's got my back and I've got her back. So that's why that representation is crucially important.
Yes. And when you mentioned that, I couldn't help but think about watching the inauguration recently, where we saw President Joe Biden and now Vice President Kamala Harris be sworn in. It was such a beautiful and a poignant moment. But my favorite moment of the day, well, one of them, there were so many beautiful moments, was when Michelle Obama kind of caught Kamala's eye. And they kind of, they didn't say anything, but they acknowledged one another. And I feel like Black women all over the country, while others may not have understood the importance of that moment of recognition and that moment of, girl, I see you, I realized what this moment is. It was just such a powerful moment. And when you talked about that, that's what I thought about. So yeah, I think that's so true. Just being able to see yourself in the person across the table from you, I just think it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Charlize, I'm going to throw it to you.
As I was listening to everything you all said, it just reminded me so much of my own journey. Because I went to the Ohio State University. If you go to Ohio State, you got to put the in front. And I remember I didn't have not one African-American professor in my whole journalism school, in the whole college. I didn't. And guess what? That made me minor in African-American studies, so I could walk over to the other building and see somebody that looked like me. I didn't have not one teacher that looked like me in that whole program. So I had to go get it. I had to go get somebody that looked like me and feel comfortable. I remember sitting in those classes thinking, I have no clue what these people are talking about in African-American studies, because again, it wasn't taught in high school, right? So I'm hearing terms and learning about people that I never heard of. And my eyes were really opened at that time. And I think about, I had nobody to go to when I didn't have any money for that second year.
Yes.
I didn't have any money. And I thought about you, Soraya, what you said. And you know what? I had to learn how to be my own advocate. When I couldn't find a mentor or somebody to say, this is how you go get money, I went to the dean's office and I sat in the office and I was like, look, I need some help paying because I cannot dig myself out of debt. We're not going to have that conversation, but that's a real conversation when it comes to us getting our degrees. How much money we're going to have to kick out? Are we going to have to pay a student loan back? Those are other pressures that we don't necessarily talk about. And then I thought about when I first started teaching at Kentucky State and I was young, I had people get out of my class, withdraw from my class. They were like, I can't take you seriously. You're too young and you're only 3 years older than me. And they would literally withdraw from my classes. And I was like, this is crazy. But it's also about the culture of a place too, right? It's the culture of a place. Because if it's a culture of a place, to be able to have those racial microaggressions come out of somebody's mouth so easily, there's a problem with the culture and climate of the institution, right?
Very much so.
I didn't mean to go off there, but I had to bring that up because it is. If that's the culture and climate of the place, you have to know what you're dealing with when you choose to go to that place. When you choose to go to school in that place, when you choose to work in that place, you have to know. You have to know what you're going to be dealing with day in and day out. And is there certain protocols in place to address those things, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, something else you said, Charlize, that I just have to kind of piggyback on a bit. You talked about knowing how to advocate for oneself. I think that that's powerful and something that I always, as I complete my journey to my master's degree, this is my last semester, one thing that has saved me in the process of being a graduate student at the University of Kentucky is that piece right there, knowing who to go to, knowing how to advocate for myself, knowing how to say what I need and find the resource on campus that could connect, you know, my need with whatever resources were available. So I think that was a powerful point that you made, and really important for, particularly for students of color, especially in spaces where we don't see people that look like us, or where we may go an entire week in classes and only see one or two other people that actually look like us. So I think that piece is imperative. Yeah.
So we're coming to our close. And so what I usually do at the end is our round robin. So I actually changed up the questions a little bit. So you all are getting the special questions. Okay, so I'm coming to you first, Erin. I'm coming to you first, girl.
Okay.
So who is your favorite historian?
Shoot, my favorite. Cornel West, even though he's a sociologist. But he's minored in African American history.
You know, because if you went to K-State and you were in any IGS class, you had to read what? Race Matters. You had
Race Matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Soraya, who do you think are some of the prominent voices on equity today?
Oh, locally or on a national level?
Whatever you want to say.
Well, I'm going to go local because, you know, I think people in the hometown will be watching. Dr. Roger Cleveland, of course, and he was K-State. He was at K-State at one point. I think he's now at EKU. I'm going to say me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Dr. Soraya Matthews.
Absolutely.
But I know we have others, Dr. Janice Wright Ross, who is also a leader in Fayette County Public Schools. And I think that may have to think of some others. You better give me a minute.
That's good. That's good.
I'm going to do mine over. She had more time to think about it.
Because when we said historian, you're supposed to say me. I am.
I was going to say you.
I thought about like Dr. Pearson at Kentucky State University. Yes. You know, and I just think about all these Black women that make history, and they're maybe not historians per se, but they give us history. I think about Jerry Gore in Moorhead, Kentucky, and I think about all those people. William Turner, Dr. Bill Turner.
Oh, yeah.
Those are Dr. Don Offutt. Forget Cornel West. Dr. Don Offutt's probably my favorite, just because when I see him, it's still a lecture, a knowledge. And I can remember the lectures he gave me at K-State. And he told me I was a descendant of enslaved Africans that weren't supposed to make it. So I don't have a choice but to make it.
And he's funny too, because he will tell me stories all the time. And he'll tell me stories about my dad. And I'm like, okay, so you've been around here a long time.
Yeah.
So Erin, if you could go back in time and meet someone, who would it be?
If I could go back in time and meet someone, who would it be? Shoot. These are hard, Charlize. Who would I meet if I could go back in time? I would like to meet my ancestors. That's the historian in me. Probably my ancestor. I would like to meet an ancestor of the 1850s or the 1860s.
Wow.
A woman, a Black woman, or of course a Black woman, but I would like to meet a woman, and I would like to sit at her feet and see how, obviously it's God, because God has been in my family, and the women in my family have been the carriers of Christianity. So obviously that, but I want to know like how and what she did to the, because here I am, here my daughters are. So that would probably be my first. My second, and I wrote about an essay about this. I always wanted to meet one of the people that I always have an issue with academically is Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. I think he was the most sexist. One of the most colored. Well, I have a lot of host of things, but I think he was brilliant. And I would love to sit down and just pick his brain and wonder what he would say to me as a Black woman with a PhD.
Okay. That's powerful. That would be interesting.
It would be. And so, Soraya, I'm ready to go a little lighter. And I'm going to say to you, what is your favorite hobby?
Oh, my favorite hobby right now, which actually changes, I don't know why, is decorating. Okay. So we have, and that I should say redecorating. So I move furniture from one room in the house to another, and I just move pictures from another wall to the other. And so I like the redecorating right now, the creativeness. That, it's a creative aspect but I also try to save money by not shopping. I just reuse what I have.
Yeah.
Well, that takes me, to Erin to ask her what is one of her favorite self-care things to do. And I have a funny joke about her because her husband's always on Facebook talking about, I have Amazon boxes on my front porch all the time. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to just take a ride through this one neighborhood. And so it's across the street from my neighborhood. So I ride through this neighborhood and I'm just riding. And I passed this house and there's all these Amazon boxes on the front porch. I said, that is exactly where they live. And guess what? It is exactly where you live. I said, that's Erin and Jay's house because there were a lot of Amazon boxes on their front.
But in my defense, I have gotten lazy to the point where I Amazon Prime toilet paper, detergent,
yes,
anything that is non-perishable that I can Amazon and it's the same price as the grocery store, and I don't have to go and lug it into my car, I Amazon. So in my defense.
But is that your self-care?
But I love, that's how I, that is my self-care. It's how my mind shuts off at night. I go through Amazon and I see and I buy too small stuff from China and then my girls can fit it. Like that's that's my self-care. I was working on my yoga certification in real life, but then the whole pandemic and I'm not a huge virtual learner. And so learning or getting my certification virtually has stopped me from getting that. But hopefully when the virtual thing is over, I'll go back to getting my yoga certification.
Nice.
That's my final question.
Black girl yoga.
Okay.
I love it.
So Yolanda, take us out.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Dr. Gilliam and Dr. Matthews, I want to thank you both so much for being so open and honest about your experiences. I know as a graduate student, I learned so much just from this short time of listening to you all. And it was just incredible to have you on the show. And I really hope it's not the last time. And to our audience, however you're listening to us, or if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us as we continue to shape our dialogue around real life issues and real talk solutions. You can find and subscribe to our podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public. Join us next time as we strive to be authentic, be transparent, and be inspired. Thank you so much.